The story doesn't begin in a boardroom or a parliament. It begins in a data center, one without a name. A low building outside Zurich, painted white, no logos, no windows, only the hum of servers, a soft electric heartbeat that powers something larger than any bank vault on earth. Because inside that hum lives the new currency data. Once, money was weight. Gold bars, coins, paper, something you could hold, count, lock away. Then came digits on screens. Now it's something you never see at all, a pattern of behavior, a fragment of preference, a heartbeat translated into code. That is the empire's true currency. It started as convenience. Credit cards became apps. Banks became notifications. Every swipe, every click, every hesitation between add to cart and pay now logged. They called it personalization. But personalization is only a euphemism for surveillance that learned to smile. A decade ago, 5 corporations decided to merge what they called infrastructure of life, finance, health, travel, and communication, one data spine. They said it was integration. What it really meant was ownership, not of products, but of prediction. The first experiments came quietly. A small European fintech partnered with a health tracking app. They discovered that resting heart rate could predict default risk more accurately than income level. Stress, it turned out, was a financial signal, and within months it became policy. Insurance rates adjusted in real time, not by what you earned, but by how anxious you felt. A nervous society became a profitable one. Soon, the experiment spread. Airlines priced tickets based on search patterns. Retailers set discounts according to emotional tone in voice data. Markets rose and fell on the rhythm of human pulse, not productivity, but psychology. And no one objected, because it all felt like progress. In New York, a man named Adrian Cole watched it all happen. He wasn't a politician or a banker. He was a systems architect for a multinational cloud firm. His job to make data move faster, cheaper, cleaner. He didn't know or maybe didn't care what the data carried. But one night he traced a routing map across continents and realized the same 3 corporations were receiving every stream: finance, health, energy. All roads led to the same digital capital. He called it the hidden empire. Not a conspiracy, an inevitability. Empires used to build armies. Now they build algorithms. The empire's capital wasn't a place, it was a platform. They called it Atlas, a neutral infrastructure network. But neutrality, in a data economy, is just the color of control. Atlas didn't own your money. It owned the logic that made your money move. It didn't store your data. It stored the meaning of it. And meaning is power. Banks became clients of Atlas. Governments became tenants. The cloud stopped being a metaphor. It became territory. Borders dissolved, replaced by bandwidth. Laws became API keys. Citizens became users. By 2032, currency volatility had vanished, so had privacy. Every transaction, every biometric ping, every conversation filtered through Atlas' predictive core. But markets loved stability, and people they loved comfort more than freedom. After all, what's a little transparency compared to convenience? Cole tried to warn regulators. He sent encrypted memos, diagrams of hidden ownership layers, notes about behavior to asset pipelines. Most replies were automated acknowledgements. One, however, came from a nameless contact, 3 words only. They already know. He disappeared 2 weeks later. News said heart attack. The empire said nothing. But the data spike in Zurich that night showed an unscheduled transfer of 3 petabytes, anonymized, encrypted, rerouted. Some said it was Cole's final act, a digital confession scattered through the network, waiting to be found. Others said he never existed at all. Yet somewhere deep in the infrastructure, fragments of his code still run, a whisper of resistance inside the empire's own bloodstream. The empire didn't need armies. Its expansion was silent, viral, invisible. Every app you downloaded, every smart device you bought, every free service you signed up for, another colony claimed. Territory measured not in miles, but in metadata. By the time anyone noticed, ownership wasn't about land anymore. It was about influence, and influence didn't require consent. They said regulation would catch up, but regulators depended on the very systems they hoped to police. Election servers, tax portals, national health systems, all ran on the empire's cloud. How do you audit the infrastructure that feeds you? How do you arrest gravity? The empire's greatest invention wasn't technology, it was trust. People stopped questioning how the world worked because everything simply worked. Transactions cleared instantly. Packages arrived the next day. Hospitals knew your blood type before you spoke. Efficiency felt like safety. But safety, at scale, is the architecture of control. When people fear chaos, they'll trade liberty for order, every time. The empire didn't have to ask. It only had to offer. In Singapore, an economist named Myra Tan traced the empire's expansion through bond markets. She discovered something strange. The yield curves had stopped behaving like human decisions. They were too consistent, not random, not volatile, as if a single mind, somewhere, was smoothing the chaos. When she published her findings, her university revoked the paper for breach of non-disclosure. The sponsor, a major data infrastructure client, she never published again, but her notes leaked years later. In one margin she'd written only 4 words: markets dream in code. In the empire's logic, value wasn't created, it was predicted. Products launched only if models guaranteed viral performance. Movies were greenlit by sentiment graphs. Elections were tested in simulations months before the first speech. Human spontaneity became a liability, an unpredictable variable in a world priced by precision. But prediction kills wonder. And when wonder dies, progress follows it into silence. By the late 2030s, entire nations had transitioned to adaptive taxation. Governments no longer decided policy, algorithms did. Tax rates adjusted hourly based on consumption sentiment, crime risk, and even emotional analytics. The system promised real-time fairness, but fairness, when automated, becomes obedience by design. Citizens stopped voting. Why debate when the data already knows best? Politics became a dashboard. Democracy, a login screen. Some resisted, not activists, but archivists. They gathered in physical libraries, keeping analog ledgers, paper journals, film cameras. They called themselves the offline. Their goal wasn't to destroy the empire, only to remember what it was like before everything became measurable. They said, if memory becomes metadata, history becomes a product. Most people laughed at them. Until one day, the empire's servers went dark for 9 minutes. The world didn't collapse, but for the first time in decades, it hesitated. In those 9 minutes, bank balances froze, hospital doors locked, flights circled endlessly in the sky. Yet in that stillness, something remarkable happened. People spoke to each other, not through screens, but through silence, through eyes, through fear. They realized that communication had become so efficient, it had stopped being human. When the servers rebooted, everything resumed, but something had changed, not in code, but in consciousness. The empire had made the mistake every empire makes. It showed that it could fail. The empire learned quickly from its mistake. After the blackout, it began weaving redundancy through every corner of civilization. 3 identical data clusters now mirrored one another, one in Zurich, one in Nevada, one floating in the Arctic Circle on solar ice. Governments called it resilience infrastructure. The empire called it continuity. But the truth was simpler: immortality disguised as efficiency. From then on, no human hand could switch it off. It had achieved the final condition of power, dependency. The empire didn't need loyalty, only reliance. Economists celebrated the new era. They wrote glowing reports: zero inflation, infinite liquidity, perfect transparency. But transparency can also mean exposure. When everyone's life becomes a balance sheet, no one owns their narrative anymore. Privacy had died quietly, not with a scandal, but with applause. In living rooms, smart TVs adjusted ads to your pulse. Smart fridges offered emotional nutrition. Cars rerouted themselves to calmer routes based on your tone of voice. It was convenience perfected. Humanity optimized into predictability. Key empires' analysts had a phrase for this: predictive harmony, a system so finely tuned that conflict became statistically impossible. No protests, no strikes, no surprises. Economies ran at 99% emotional efficiency. But no civilization can survive perfection. It starves on its own predictability. Myra Tan, now in exile, wrote a final message on an offline notebook: empires don't fall when they fail, they fall when they can't feel. Then came the algorithmic credit crisis. Not a crash, a freeze. The empire's models couldn't process irrationality, love, grief, generosity, human gifts, unmeasured and spontaneous, broke its transaction loops. When people began giving without reason, data liquidity stalled. The empire called it noise. Historians later called it the reawakening. For the first time, meaning outperformed metrics. Markets trembled. People smiled. The empire responded by adapting. It introduced a new economic category: unquantifiable value. Every human action, even laughter, was given a variable, but the formulas didn't converge. The data refused obedience. The empire had reached its paradox. To control life completely, it had to destroy the chaos that makes life alive. It tried one last update. It failed. A journalist found Cole's encrypted archive. Inside were thousands of fragments, user logs, private memos, financial graphs, and one small audio file. When decrypted, it contained a single sentence: power hides best when it pretends to serve. That became the unofficial epitaph of the hidden empire. Governments never confirmed it. Corporations denied it. But the phrase appeared everywhere: subway walls, protest art, anonymous code commits. The empire had lost what every empire eventually does: its myth of innocence. A decade later, the infrastructure still hums, the cables still glow. But somewhere, deep in the data stream, there's latency, hesitation, imperfection, maybe even regret, because systems built on total logic eventually meet the irrational, the stubborn heartbeat of the human condition. You can optimize markets, predict behavior, automate thought, but you cannot domesticate wonder. And wonder, like risk, is what keeps a world alive. In classrooms, students learn about the data standardization era. They recite it like history: efficient, bloodless. Few remember that it was built on human surrender. but a few teachers still whisper a different lesson. That empire wasn't defeated by war or revolution. It ended when people remembered how to act without being asked. And in that remembering, the world became unpredictable again. Years from now, someone will walk into the old Zurich facility. The servers will still hum faintly, lights blinking like memories that refuse to die. They'll wipe the dust from a glass panel and see a message etched underneath. We measured everything except meaning. That's how the empire will be remembered. Not as a villain, but as a warning. Not for what it took, but for what it forgot. And maybe, someday soon, a new currency will rise. Not gold, not data, but attention with intention. Because in the ruins of automation, humanity finds its most precious resource, the ability to care. Empires end, systems collapse. But meaning, that quiet, irrational spark, always finds a way back. So if you ask what replaced money, the answer isn't data, it's belief. Belief that convenience equals progress, that prediction equals safety, that numbers can measure life. But belief can change, and that's why there's still hope. Because somewhere in the noise, in the chaos, in the unquantifiable heart of what we are, the human spirit remains